Did the ex-military whistleblower come forward with information through our friend Dr. J? Well, we have an exclusive interview, and we're going to share a portion of it with you right here at Third Phase Moon in regards to the Secret Space Force program. Emery Smith claims he has the insight and the information in regards to a program that is above top secret. Listen to this.
Let's talk about your Air Force career, when you started. You said you were, EMT and surgical first assistant, right?
Yeah, I went in as a 90252, a surgical technologist. I actually wanted to go be a pilot for the Air Force, and the Army offered me a scholarship for helicopters. I was in Army ROTC and Civil Air Patrol, an auxiliary of the Air Force, 4 years prior to joining the military. So I kind of knew what I was getting into. But they offered me some other special, things with medical. I really liked medical a lot, so I took the surgical tech program, which led me into a plethora of other options and other different specialties, including EMT and a vast array of others, which you guys can see online at emerysmith.net. But yeah, it was at the time, this is, 1990. I went into training in San Antonio, Texas there, and Sheppard Air Force Base, and was stationed in England Air Force Base first at the 477th Tactical Fighter Wing. A-10s were there. That base is closed now. It's right next to Fort Polk Army installation there near Alexandria, Louisiana. And I was there for a little bit, and then they transferred me over to Kirtland Air Force Base, where
New Mexico,
I went up the ranks pretty quick. Yeah. Currently Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that's where things started to unfold, where they were offering me some moonlighting positions, which at the time, I just needed some extra money because I really wanted to buy this motorcycle I was looking at the Honda shop. Because I was young and needed some extra cash. And I said, sure, let's do it. And next thing you know, there was quite the briefing and quite the security clearance involved. And I really thought I was just going to be doing some organ harvesting for fallen soldiers. And I assumed, come to find out, that really wasn't the case. But they test you out, and every quarter that you do well in these projects that are on the base and off base, but they're compartmentalized projects that actually corporations own. So they have active duty service members pulling double duty and pulling extra hours and extra pay from these projects. These projects could be in underground facilities or above ground facilities. I was, of course, in the underground facilities in Sandia Labs and Los Alamos Labs, where these the actual facilities go very, very deep into the ground, hundreds of floors down, and they rent out these different segments, of the areas to different corporations. So you may have multiple corporations that are, provided protection of the security of the base, but the military people don't even know what's going on down there half of the time, and the corporations can work there peacefully, non-interrupted, to do all their, weird science and frickin' magic, WSFM we call it, and that's where it started getting interesting. And I knew right away that it was very intriguing, of course, to say the least, where I started dissecting tissue samples and getting samples of these tissues that at the time may or may not have been of Earth origin. You don't get to know where the sample came from. That's the whole thing of being compartmentalized. And also, maybe it was grown there. Maybe they had grown this tissue. And a lot of the tissue, too, I remember them telling us 3% of a lot of stuff that we do operate on is actually disinformation, just in case we do at some time go out amongst the public and, talk about this. It's 25 years later, but, at the time, I think that was a smart move on them for protection.
When I think of corporations that are involved in SAP, Special Access Projects, I always come back to one of the first ones that really started it off, which is, to me, is Skunkworks with Ben Rich and his announcements he made to UCLA. Did you ever interact with them?
Well, not directly, indirectly, because a lot of the craft and stuff, some of the extraterrestrials that we worked on, which is very interesting. Actually, at one time I was working on a specimen with another physician, and he asked, during the procedure, "Oh, we need to go, down the road here and look at something else. I want you to come with me." And this is about a year into the program, and I've never actually traveled with a doctor to another location inside underground in the facility. And we came upon this giant underground hangar where there was this giant craft, and it was a type of looked like a Jello mold. Those Jello molds that you buy.
That's like what Bob Lazar talked about in one of the 9 at S4, the Jello mold.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He worked on the sports model, but he gave nicknames to each of the craft, the top hat. One of them was the Jello mold. So this is ironic because you're talking about the same identical word that he used to describe what it looked like.
Yeah, I don't follow too much about his stuff, but of course I know exactly who he is, and I know, of course, John Lear, one of his close friends that I interviewed a lot of. And it was interesting because they want to, and just this is going back to your question, Raytheon and Skunk Works and Boeing had a lot of facilities, underneath there, also under different names, but they were definitely part of that. And we were taking samples from the actual craft. The craft has an organic scaffolding, and this organic scaffolding is also quite conscious and also has an energetic field to it, which matches the genetic DNA of the specimens we worked on. And that's where I was putting 2 and 2 together, going, wow, here we have a craft, here we have a being. They're obviously somehow connected, and it wasn't until down the road I realized that these crafts and these also instruments that they use and weapons are all connected to the actual being. So they're connected not only genetically but consciously in a way.
So bio-robots, essentially, right? The craft.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
There's a question here. I'm going to use the last part of the user's name as Mr. Sausage. I give you a super chat to ask you this question. It says, do you know who Q is, and do you think they have Project Looking Glass tech?
I don't get into Q that much. I don't follow the pop culture stuff as much as everybody else does. I'm more of a scientist than an investigator. I'm falling into the investigative that role right now for the last 5 or 6 years. But they do have definitely a Project Looking Glass that is real. They call it many different names in the project. They have an ability to also time travel. They have ability to look into a possible future, which changes all the time. There's also different times and different, not dimensions. It's in the 3D, but it's overlaying. So there's many of you, many of me on different timelines.
So essentially, each decision we make would make another timeline, right?
Yes, very, very much so.
Now, when you also mentioned they have the ability, I'm assuming the ETs to time travel and also time view. I'm assuming that since the ETs have had this ability and we have had craft crashes, extraterrestrials here on Earth, do humans in these special access programs have also traveled through time and viewed time?
Yeah, there are definitely teams that do this. Now, I've not been part of time travel. I have gone through these portals that are man-made and also built on ancient sites around the world that you can go on certain times to a different destination, and you do lose a little bit of time during that journey. But they actually have agents that are time travelers that do go into the past and into the future because it's already happened. And it's always one possible time or one possible, past. So that's what's interesting is, there is really the time is what messes everyone up because there's no time. The time is now, all the time. We're always here and we're always there all the time. And there's ways to access that, and They have done an okay job of making that man-made, but they haven't perfected it yet. So there has been a lot of catastrophic events where teams have been lost and people have not returned, and that maybe they're stuck, in that time.
That would really be terrible.
Uh,
If you imagine if you went back to the past, say to see, Jesus Christ on the cross, or even go back several million, say 100 million years to the last extinction level event, and you were stuck. I mean, well, I don't even know how you'd be able to survive, because you'd be faced with higher temperatures, much higher oxygen levels, which a lot of scientists say is the reason for the huge growth of these dinosaurs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, back to 65 million years ago, we have a different atmosphere. We have basically the animals have electrostatically charged water out there because of the lightning storms that last for months and months and sometimes years at a time, where people that know about the fourth state of water, the fourth phase of water, has amazing resilience to supercharging mitochondria and allowing the beings to grow to massive sizes. And the gravity was a little bit different. Of course, the continents were different. The atmosphere was different. So it was an amazing time for, life to sprout up again, because this has been going on for more than hundreds of millions of years. And I think when you look at that, and just to get back to that, we know this because we don't always send humans, through these portals. We'll send programmed life forms and clones and even mechanical drones. And they'll come back through these time travel devices with video and audio and an amazing plethora of scientific information, just like when we dropped the rover on Mars. Think about this as we're sending something in time and hoping it comes back with information that we can measure, how hot, how cold, what are the chemicals that make up that atmosphere, is it livable for humans to exist at that time? So yes, you're absolutely correct. These things are happening, but it's not just humans going through these portals and going into these time travel devices.
And the best part about sending, say, drones or something like that, rovers, whatever it be, in the past, is you don't have to worry about the human cost. And if it's just a few $1,000s for, a drone, I'm not talking about Predator drones, something like, say, what an everyday hobbyist would use, a $2,000, a good drone, right? That could travel multiple miles, as opposed to, say, a Predator drone, a Reaper drone, right? And again, it's just money. We don't have to worry about the cost of human life, and the information is so valuable to us upon return. I think that's one of the greatest inventions that we can have. Now, here there are a couple questions that have already stacked up that seem really interesting, so let me read them to you. First one is from Nicholas Cashmore. He said, "What is the most amazing find that you ever have found?"
Wow, that's a great question. I'm really enamored by, number one, it's not such an object, but the science behind telepathy, I think, was probably the biggest eye-opener for me, is to learn how to communicate with beings without speaking. Because when telepathy, you're basically asking the question, and the person hears it in their mind, but they also get everything else with that. So if I say, "Hey, Dr. J, let's go take a walk in the park," I'm showing you the park in my mind. You can smell the flowers in my mind. I want to go to the park. So you have all the senses and emotions of that sentence going into that person's mind. So into that person's consciousness and mind, and it's all extrapolated into this beautiful picture of, you cannot mess up telepathy, because I'm a horrible texter. All my colleagues tell me this, because they might write 5 or 6 sentences, and I'll just answer it with one sentence, and they're like, "How rude is it? How rude is Emery being today?" But I'm not being. I'm just that way. But with telepathy, it's very cut, clear, and dry. And I think communication for the future is the way to go for our children and for the planets and for the world, because we're going into that type of into that trajectory where we're not going to be using so much our voice to get things across. And I think that's a good thing, a great thing to look forward to. Of course, the technology is always amazing I'm a big dog lover, so when they had these canine units that they were these are hybrid canines that they had made in the projects to come with us on a lot of these missions, I was just amazed by the futuristic devices that they were wearing, the things that were mounted to the canine units to help their perception and also have a direct link into their consciousness and brain, so they could hear farther, they can sense things farther, they can sense biological contaminants, they can sense earthquakes and tremors, and also if storms are approaching. So I thought that was pretty amazing to see these. And if you see my episodes on Gaia TV, I do talk about some of those missions and some of the canine units that they have brought on. And they also have canine units at the bases in the security areas that, as you walk by, can detect viruses, even a common cold virus. And also, if you are wearing any type of electronics on you, or if you have electronics in your body that you have swallowed, a lot of double agents have tried to sneak in with some things and were unsuccessful because of these specially trained hybrid canine units. So I think those are some. I mean, everything was amazing, of course. It was always an amazing, eye-opening adventure every day, and you learn something every day. And I was a sucker and a sponge to extrapolate from, of course, the people that have been there before me, and also having access to the underground facility library, which, according to depending on your clearance level, you get to access things, and on downtime, you get for good behavior and good work ethics, you get credits to go into these places. You're allowed to utilize it on specimens. If you have a question or you want to rub up on a specimen that you are not familiar with, you can go down there and see what other researchers have done before you, decades ago, and see what you're up against and see some of the tips that they left. I'm sure there are classified technicians there reading and watching my videos in these libraries to find out, what was my experience with this journey or this expedition or this tissue sample. So I think the library too was really fascinating for me, because I just love to absorb information and also see what had happened before I ever came along. Like, what were they doing 10, 20, 30 years ago in the projects here at this facility that I should maybe be aware of? I love the history of it.
Let me make a comment on a few things you said. First of all, I think it's obviously the way to go for them to be paying attention to what you've learned and acquired information on, because they could just build on that. It would be sort of a waste of their resources to send someone to experience all those, and then the next group or team of people have to start from scratch. It'd be like a lost cause, because you're having a bunch of people repeat the same information rather than building off each other to get more knowledge. And also, when you mentioned about these dogs that are able to sniff out electronics, I do know in the U.S. prison systems, not just the federal, but state prisons, one of the biggest problems is cell phones. And they actually have trained canines to sniff out cell phones.
Wow.
Yeah,
No
it blew
way.
my mind
That is
away.
amazing.
Yeah, totally. And with what you were saying about telepathy, I think that's obviously the best way to go for multiple reasons. First of all, we no longer would have the facade. Everyone carries a facade with them, right? When we speak to each other, we're always kind of holding back some secret about us. When you have telepathy and you're going into someone's head, you see everything. You're always going to be 100% truthful. And like you mentioned, if you're going to tell me we're going to go to a park, you're going to be sending me the imagery, the exact location, and I'll be able to picturing what you're sending to me. And moreover, the best part is we're able to, like you said, communicate with other creatures that are not on this world, but also on this world. For instance, dogs or monkeys or birds. They too will be able to understand the messages we're going to be giving them.
Yes, right. Exactly, Dr. J. All the plants, animals, and everything around us are very conscious, and they can talk. You can talk to them, and you can communicate with them. And I feel sad for a lot of the dolphins and the animals of the planet that are disrespected in that fashion, because just because they don't, let's say, talk or speak English or speak a language, does not mean that they are not conscious enough to communicate in different modalities and other ways. So I think people should really wake up about, the animals and the plants of the earth, because those are really living beings as well that have a say, in this planet.
Agreed.
I'm
we
glad
have
you brought
to
that
share our planet with them. A lot of people forget that this is not necessarily our home as much as we're visitors, because we have so many billions, if not trillions, of different species, from bacteria to dolphins to plants. I think it's a huge plethora of life that we fail to recognize that, yes, we may be having the ones that are standing on 2 feet and using opposable thumbs, which able to build things that, say, dolphins cannot, but that's not to say that we don't have intelligent other species that are living in the waters. We know dolphins have very high intelligence. We know they communicate with each other through sonar and other means. Anyway, let me get to the other questions for you. This is from Lasha Senyak. Does the government, because they know the future, try to sideline people that may publish or say the truth?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they know of a possible future, and many insiders and political figures and other people, have been, unfortunately, either killed or persuaded not to go forward. I've been in that position before, where they had visited and wanted me to stop talking about certain things. They don't care to talk about ETs and UFOs all day long, but they don't want me talking about, the free energy over unity devices I'm working on. They don't want me to talk about, stem cells and growth factors and things that are helping cure people around the planet, to help heal them on their own, because that is, you're stepping on big pharma and you're stepping on gas, coal, and oil that makes all the money. And when there's something, money to be made, there's no money to be made in me coming out and, talking about this. There's only money to be lost if I start revealing the secrets. And that's what I've been doing the last 3 years.
We're going to be supplying the original link below so you can listen to the entire interview with Dr. J and Emery Smith. It's mind-blowing. Again, the link's below. Everybody, keep your eyes on the skies. Be safe. We'll see you again next time. And make sure you tell Dr. J that Third Phase of Moon sent you.